The old gas station stood like a forgotten monument along Highway 43, its weathered facade bearing witness to countless stories of passage. But none were as haunting as that of the German shepherd who had claimed the edge of the property as his vigilant post. There he stood, day after day, through 4 merciless years of scorching summers and bone-chilling winters, his amber eyes fixed on the endless ribbon of asphalt that stretched toward the horizon. Those eyes, once bright with the joy of companionship, now held the weight of an unbearable absence, a void no amount of time seemed capable of filling. What force could bind a creature to such unwavering devotion? What promise remained unfulfilled in the loyal heart of this solitary sentinel, causing him to reject comfort, shelter, and the very mercy of those who sought to end his suffering? If you've ever wondered about the depths of connection that can exist between humans and animals, about the mysterious bonds that transcend our understanding of love and loyalty, then this story will speak to your heart. Subscribe to Hearts and Paws to discover more stories that celebrate the profound emotional lives of the creatures who share our world. Listen to Max's entire journey, a testament to the extraordinary capacity for love and devotion that exists within the animal kingdom. The locals called him Max, though no one knew if that was truly his name. He had appeared 4 years ago, seemingly from nowhere, taking his position by the station's weathered sign as if appointed by some unseen authority. At first, people assumed he was merely lost, that he would soon move on or be claimed. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and months to years. Through rain and snow, through the blinding summer heat and the bitter winter frost, Max maintained his vigil. Betty Clarkson, who owned the small diner across the road, was the first to establish something resembling a routine with him. She was a woman whose kindness had been tempered but not diminished by life's disappointments, and something about the shepherd's quiet perseverance struck a chord deep within her. Every morning and evening, she would leave a bowl of water and food at a respectful distance, watching from the window as the dog approached only after she had retreated. "He's not a stray, not really," she explained to curious customers who noticed her ritual. "Strays wander, they adapt, they seek shelter and company. Max is waiting." The dog's remarkable discipline impressed everyone who observed him. He never begged, never approached vehicles or pedestrians, and never ventured far from his self-assigned post. He accepted offerings of food only when left alone, and while he didn't resist the occasional pat on the head from those brave enough to approach, his demeanor made it clear that such interactions were mere distractions from his purpose. Several well-meaning individuals had attempted to coax him into their vehicles or homes over the years. Animal control had been called more than once. Yet somehow, with a gentle dignity that deterred forceful intervention, Max always managed to evade capture, returning to his post with quiet determination. It was as if he existed in a liminal space between the wild and the domestic, bound by neither, yet governed by rules only he understood. Chapter 2. The observer Samuel Thompson had built his journalism career on human interest stories, tales of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. At 43, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had witnessed both the best and worst of humanity, he had developed an instinct for narratives that would resonate with readers. He hadn't expected to find one at a nondescript gas station 30 miles outside of Portland, on his way back from a disappointing interview. The gas station attendant, a lanky young man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, mentioned the dog casually while Samuel paid for his coffee. "If you're into weird stories, you should check out our local celebrity," he said, nodding toward the window. "That German shepherd's been standing watch for 4 years straight. People around here have theories. Some say he's guarding buried treasure. Others think he's waiting for aliens." He chuckled, but his eyes held a genuine curiosity. "Most likely it's a dead owner though. That's what the old-timers say." Samuel's gaze followed the attendant's gesture to where a majestic German shepherd sat attentively at the edge of the property, his posture alert despite the obvious signs of age and exposure. 4 years, Samuel repeated, his journalistic interest peaked. "In the same spot, rain or shine. Betty from the diner feeds him. She can tell you more." 20 minutes later, Samuel sat in a vinyl booth at Betty's roadside diner, nursing a cup of surprisingly good coffee as the owner herself slid into the seat across from him. Betty was in her 60s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that showed decades of honest work. "I don't know much more than what you've already heard," she said, her voice carrying the slight rasp of a former smoker. "He showed up 4 years ago this coming September. Thin, but not starving. No collar, but well-trained. I figured he'd move on after a few days." Samuel nodded, taking notes. "But he didn't. Nope. First winter I was sure he wouldn't make it. Built him a shelter out of an old doghouse my son had. Found it the next day, dragged 20 feet away. He wanted nothing to do with it. Preferred to sleep under that old gas price sign, snow or no snow. And no one's been able to take him in?" Betty's eyes took on a distant quality. "It's not that simple. He's not aggressive, quite the opposite. But there's something, I don't know how to explain it. It's like he's made a promise to someone, and breaking that promise isn't an option for him." Samuel spent the rest of the afternoon observing Max from a distance. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the asphalt, he witnessed Betty's feeding ritual. She placed the bowl down 30 feet from the dog, then retreated to her diner. Only when she was gone did Max approach the food, eating methodically before returning to his post. That night, in his motel room, Samuel couldn't shake the image of the patient shepherd. There was a story here, not the quirky, light-hearted piece he had initially imagined, but something deeper. Something about unwavering faith in an inconstant world. Chapter 3. The Investigation. The autumn air carried a crisp edge as Samuel returned to the gas station the following morning. Armed with his camera and a newfound determination, he decided to dig deeper into Max's mystery. After spending another hour observing the dog, he began methodically questioning locals who frequented the station and diner. Most accounts were similar. The dog had appeared sometime in September 4 years ago, already an adult but not elderly. No one had witnessed his arrival. He had simply been there one morning, watching the road with that same expectant gaze. Several people remembered early attempts to check for a microchip or identification, all thwarted by the dog's elusive nature. "It was the darndest thing," recalled Jim Milligan, a retired trucker who stopped at the station regularly. "Animal control came with those pole leashes, but that dog looked at them with such dignity, I guess you'd call it. Made them feel like they were doing something shameful. They left him some food and said they'd come back, but the second attempt never happened. Small-town priorities, I suppose." By midday, Samuel had compiled numerous anecdotes, but no concrete leads. He was about to expand his investigation to neighboring towns when Betty approached him with a faded newspaper clipping. "Found this in my drawer last night," she said, handing him the yellowed paper. "Thought it might be related." The article, dated September 12, 4 years prior, reported a single vehicle accident on Highway 43, approximately 2 miles from the gas station. A family of 3, Michael and Anna Smith, along with their 10-year-old son Oliver, had been involved. The car had swerved to avoid a deer and crashed into a ravine. While all family members had survived with injuries, the article mentioned that the family's dog had fled the scene and could not be located despite search efforts. Samuel felt his pulse quicken. Did anyone make the connection at the time? Betty shook her head. The accident happened before Max showed up. By the time he became a fixture, most folks had forgotten about that crash. I only remembered because my nephew was one of the EMTs on scene. With this potential lead, Samuel drove to the county hospital where the Smith family had been treated. Medical privacy laws prevented staff from sharing detailed information, but a sympathetic nurse confirmed that the family had survived and eventually relocated to Seattle for Michael Smith's rehabilitation. Next, Samuel visited the crash site, now showing little evidence of the tragedy that had occurred. Standing on the roadside, looking down into the shallow ravine where the Smiths' car had landed, he tried to imagine the chaos of that night. The screeching tires, the shattering glass, the terrified barking of a dog suddenly thrust into a nightmare. In the aftermath, disoriented and frightened, had Max run until he found the nearest landmark, the gas station, and then simply waited. The theory was gaining traction in Samuel's mind, but he needed confirmation. After several phone calls and considerable persistence, he managed to obtain a contact number for Anna Smith. The conversation was brief and guarded. Yes, they had owned a German shepherd named Max. Yes, he had been lost during the accident. No, despite searching, they had never found him. The family had eventually moved to Seattle for Michael's specialized treatment, and later, unable to face returning to the area with its painful memories, they had settled there permanently. When Samuel described the dog at the gas station, the line went silent for so long that he thought the call had dropped. "Mrs. Smith," he prompted gently. Could you send me a picture? Could you send me a picture?" Her voice wavered with suppressed emotion. Samuel emailed several photographs he had taken that morning. 20 minutes later, his phone rang. "That's him," Anna Smith whispered, her voice thick with tears. "That's our Max." Chapter 4. The family. Anna Smith sat in her modest Seattle apartment, staring at the photos on her laptop screen with trembling hands. The dog in the images was thinner, his muzzle now graying, but there was no mistaking those intelligent eyes and the distinctive white patch on his chest. "I can't believe he's alive," she murmured, more to herself than to the journalist on the phone. All this time, for Anna, the past 4 years had been an exercise in rebuilding from ruins. The accident had left her husband Michael with a traumatic brain injury that altered his personality and capabilities. Once a vibrant, ambitious architect, he now struggled with basic tasks and worked part-time as a grocery store clerk. Their son Oliver, now 14, had physically recovered from his injuries, but carried emotional scars that manifested in quiet withdrawal and occasional nightmares. The loss of Max had been yet another wound in their collective trauma, one that eventually scabbed over but never truly healed. In the immediate aftermath of the accident, with medical bills mounting and Michael requiring constant care, searching for their missing dog had necessarily become a lower priority. Later, when the acute crisis had passed, the family had posted online notices and contacted local shelters, but as months stretched on with no word, hope had gradually faded. Anna had finally stopped looking for Max around the same time she stopped looking for remnants of her old life. It was easier that way, to accept the losses and focus on what remained. Now, confronted with the reality that Max had been waiting all this time, she felt a complex mixture of joy, guilt, and trepidation. "He's been there for 4 years, she asked, her voice small, "in the same place." "According to everyone I've spoken with," Samuel confirmed. "It seems he's been waiting for your return." That evening, after Oliver returned from school, Anna showed him the photographs. The boy's reaction was immediate and visceral, a sharp intake of breath, followed by silent tears streaming down his face. "Can we go get him, Mom?" he asked, in the most animated voice she had heard from him in years. "Please, can we bring Max home?" Anna glanced toward the bedroom where Michael was resting after his shift. Their life was stable now, if not exactly happy. Would disrupting this careful balance be wise? And yet, looking at the hope in her son's eyes, a light she had feared permanently extinguished, how could she refuse? "We'll need to talk to your father," she said carefully, "and it might not be simple. Max has been on his own for a long time. He might have changed." Oliver's determination didn't waver. He recognized the crash site. "He's been waiting for us. He'll remember us too." Later that night, after Oliver had gone to bed, Anna showed the photos to Michael. His reaction was harder to interpret, his emotions often muffled by the neurological damage he had sustained. "Dog," he said simply, touching the screen. Then, after a long pause, "Our dog." "Yes," Anna confirmed, watching his face carefully. "It's Max. He's been waiting near where we had the accident. Oliver wants to go get him." Michael frowned slightly, the expression more of concentration than disapproval. "Long drive. We could fly to Portland and rent a car," Anna suggested. "Make it a weekend trip." Another long pause. "Then Oliver would like that." Anna recognized the subtext. Since the accident, Michael had become acutely aware of his limitations as a father. He seized any opportunity to bring joy to his son, perhaps to compensate for what he could no longer provide. If retrieving Max would make Oliver happy, Michael would endure whatever discomfort the journey entailed. That night, as her family slept, Anna sat alone at the kitchen table, composing an email to Samuel Thompson. They would come that weekend, she wrote. They would attempt to reclaim the dog who had never stopped waiting for them. But she also expressed her concerns. What if Max didn't recognize them? What if he couldn't readjust to domestic life? What if this reunion caused more pain than healing? Samuel's response was thoughtful but optimistic. He would help facilitate the meeting, he assured her, and whatever the outcome, wouldn't knowing be better than wondering. Anna wasn't entirely convinced. In her experience, closure was not always the gift it was purported to be. Sometimes it merely exchanged one form of pain for another. Nevertheless, she began making travel arrangements. For Oliver's sake, if nothing else, they needed to try. Chapter 5. The journey. The flight from Seattle to Portland was turbulent, mirroring the emotional state of the Smith family as they embarked on their uncertain mission. Oliver sat by the window, his face a study in nervous anticipation. He had barely slept the night before, alternating between excited planning and anxious doubt. Anna occupied the middle seat, maintaining physical contact with both her son and husband, a hand on Oliver's knee, her shoulder pressed against Michael's. In the 4 years since the accident, she had become the family's emotional conductor, attuned to the subtle shifts in her loved one's states of mind, always ready to amplify joy or dampen distress. Michael sat stoically in the aisle seat, his large frame slightly hunched as if perpetually bracing for impact. The trip was already taxing for him. Crowds and unfamiliar environments often triggered his anxiety, a common aftermath of his brain injury. Yet he had insisted on coming, understanding on some fundamental level the importance of this journey for his family's healing. "What if he's angry at us?" Oliver asked suddenly, breaking a long silence, "for leaving him behind?" Anna considered her response carefully. "Dogs don't think like that, sweetheart. They don't hold grudges the way people sometimes do. But he waited for so long, all alone. That's because dogs are loyal," she said, squeezing his hand. "It's one of the things that makes them so special." Oliver nodded, but the worry didn't leave his eyes. At 14, he was old enough to understand that good intentions didn't guarantee happy endings. The innocent certainty of childhood had been one of many casualties of the accident. After landing, they collected their minimal luggage and located the rental car Samuel had arranged for them. The drive from Portland to the gas station would take approximately 40 minutes that stretched before them like an eternity. Michael sat in the passenger seat, while Anna drove, following the GPS directions. Oliver leaned forward from the back, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, as if he might spot Max at any moment. The family's conversation was sparse, limited to practical observations and occasional reassurances. As they approached their destination, familiar landmarks began to emerge. Though they had only traveled this road once before, on that fateful day 4 years ago, certain features had been seared into their memories: the distinctive outcropping of rocks, the bend in the road just before the ravine, where their car had plunged. Anna felt her hands tighten on the steering wheel as they passed the accident site. In her peripheral vision, she saw Michael stiffen, his breathing becoming shallow. From the back seat came the sound of Oliver's sharp intake of breath. "We're almost there," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just a few more minutes." The gas station appeared on the horizon, its weathered sign a beacon drawing them forward. As arranged, Samuel Thompson stood waiting in the parking lot. Beside him, at a respectful distance, stood Betty Clarkson, her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. But it was the figure at the edge of the property that captured their complete attention. A German shepherd, standing alert, his gaze fixed on their approaching vehicle, with an intensity that seemed to transcend the physical realm. "There he is," Oliver whispered, his voice breaking. "There's Max." Chapter 6. The Reunion. The rental car rolled to a stop in the gas station parking lot, its engine falling silent in the late afternoon air. For a moment, none of the Smiths moved, each processing the reality of what they were about to face. Through the windshield, they could see Max still standing at his post, watching their vehicle with apparent interest, but making no move to approach. Samuel Thompson stepped forward, gently tapping on Anna's window. She lowered it, offering a tense smile. "I'm glad you made it safely," he said, his voice low and calm. "I've been with Max all afternoon, making sure he stayed in the area. He seems aware that something's different today." Anna nodded, unable to find words. It was Oliver who spoke. "What should we do?" he asked from the back seat, his voice small but determined. "Should we call him?" Samuel considered this. Betty suggests that you approach him slowly, one at a time. Let him make the final move. He's been independent for a long time. He might need space to process. The family exited the car cautiously. Michael moved with particular deliberation, his movements sometimes uncoordinated, another lingering effect of his injuries. Betty approached them with a warm smile, introducing herself briefly before stepping back to give them room. "Who wants to go first?" Anna asked, though she already knew the answer. Oliver stepped forward, his lanky teenage frame visibly trembling. "I will." The boy began walking slowly toward the spot where Max stood watching. The distance between them, perhaps 50 feet, seemed to represent more than physical space. It was 4 years of separation, of growth and change, of parallel lives that had once been intertwined and might soon converge again. "Max," Oliver called softly when he was about halfway. "Max, it's me, it's Oliver." The German shepherd's ears pricked forward at the sound of his name. His posture shifted subtly, alert but not alarmed. He tilted his head slightly, studying the approaching figure with intense focus. Oliver continued his slow advance, now speaking continuously in a gentle stream of memories and reassurances. "Remember the blue ball we used to play with, and how you'd sleep at the foot of my bed. Remember how you'd always know when I was sad, and you'd put your head on my knee." 10 feet away, Oliver stopped, following Samuel's advice to let the dog make the final choice. He sank to his knees on the gravel, making himself smaller, less threatening. "It's okay if you don't remember right away," he said, his voice breaking. "We've all changed, but we never forgot you, Max." Never. For what seemed an eternity, Max remained motionless, studying the kneeling boy with inscrutable intensity. The air between them hummed with potential energy, the accumulated weight of 4 years of waiting distilled into this single moment of truth. Then, with deliberate caution, Max took a step forward, then another. His movement was stiff, showing the effects of age and his long exposure to the elements. He approached Oliver with his head lowered, nostrils flaring, as he took in the boy's scent. Oliver remained perfectly still, tears now flowing freely down his face. "Hi, buddy," he whispered. "It's me. I came back." Max circled the boy once, twice, his nose working overtime. Then he came to a stop directly in front of Oliver, their faces level with each other. The dog's amber eyes, which had spent years scanning the horizon for familiar shapes, now focused entirely on the face before him. Recognition dawned gradually, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of the vigilant posture. With aching slowness, Max leaned forward and gently licked Oliver's cheek, tasting the salt of his tears. The sound that escaped the boy was half laugh, half sob. "You remember," he gasped. "You remember me." From the sidelines, Anna watched through her own tears as her son carefully wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. Max tolerated the embrace, his tail giving a tentative, rusty wag, perhaps the first in years. Next to her, Michael made a low sound in his throat. "My turn," he said, his speech slightly slurred as it often was when he was emotional. Anna placed a steadying hand on his arm. "Are you sure? We can take this slowly." But Michael was already moving forward with his characteristic determination, his gait uneven but purposeful. Oliver looked up at his approach, reluctantly loosening his hold on Max. The dog's reaction to Michael was immediate and complex. His ears flattened briefly, and he took a step back, seemingly confused by the changed manner of movement in the man he had once known. Michael had been strong and assured before the accident. Now his movements were hesitant, his balance uncertain. Michael stopped, sensing the dog's uncertainty. With effort, he lowered himself to a crouch, though he couldn't kneel completely due to the stiffness in his damaged leg. "Max," he said clearly, one of the few words he could still pronounce perfectly. "Good dog." He extended his hand, palm up, a gesture unchanged from their past together. For a tense moment, Max hesitated, sniffing the air between them. Then, with delicate precision, he stepped forward and pressed his muzzle into Michael's palm. Michael's face transformed, joy breaking through the often flat effect left by his brain injury. "Good dog," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. It was Anna's turn now. She approached slowly, already crying openly. Of the three of them, she had spent the most time with Max in their previous life. The walks while Oliver was at school, and Michael at work, the quiet companionship as she worked from home, the silent understanding during her occasional bouts of melancholy. "Hello, old friend," she said softly as she knelt before him. "You've been so brave." Max studied her intently, his nose working to connect present scent with past memory. Then he stepped forward and rested his head on her shoulder, a gesture so familiar, so unchanged by the passing years, that Anna broke down completely, burying her face in his coarse fur. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "We looked for you. We did, but not hard enough, not long enough." From nearby, Betty spoke up, her voice gentle. "Don't you apologize to that dog, honey. You were fighting for your lives." He understood that. That's why he waited. The simple wisdom of her words penetrated Anna's guilt. Perhaps Betty was right. Perhaps on some level, Max had understood that his family hadn't abandoned him by choice, that circumstances, not indifference, had separated them. As the emotional reunion continued, Samuel discreetly documented the moment with his camera, capturing the tentative rebuilding of bonds that had been stretched but never broken. The afternoon light cast long shadows across the gas station lot, highlighting the tableau of reconnection against the backdrop of Max's long vigil. After some time, the practical questions began to surface. Where would Max sleep tonight? How would they transport him back to Seattle? Would he even be willing to leave his post after so many years? "We have pet-friendly rooms reserved at a motel about 15 minutes from here," Samuel explained. "I thought, well, it might be good to spend some time together on neutral ground before making any big changes." Anna nodded gratefully. "That sounds perfect. But will he come with us?" It was Oliver who solved this dilemma, retrieving a length of rope from the rental car to fashion a makeshift leash. With gentle coaxing and continuous reassurance, he managed to secure it around Max's neck. The dog seemed uncertain but not resistant, looking between the three family members as if confirming that they would all be going together. As they prepared to leave, Betty approached with a small package wrapped in waxed paper. "His favorite sandwich meat," she explained with a smile. "Might help him feel more comfortable in the new surroundings." Anna embraced the older woman impulsively. "Thank you for everything, for looking after him all this time." Betty waved off her gratitude. "He looked after himself mostly. I just made sure he didn't starve." She bent down to Max's level, scratching behind his ears one last time. "You go on with your family now. Your waiting days are over." As the Smith family walked toward their rental car, Oliver leading Max carefully on his makeshift leash, Michael moving slowly alongside, and Anna bringing up the rear, Betty turned to Samuel with misty eyes. "You think he'll be okay?" she asked quietly. "After being on his own for so long?" Samuel watched as Oliver helped Max into the back seat of the car, the boy's movements gentle and patient. "I think," he said thoughtfully, "that some bonds can't be broken, no matter how much time passes. He might need time to adjust, but he's going home. That's what matters." The car pulled away slowly, carrying its reunited passengers toward an uncertain but hopeful future. In the back seat, Max sat upright between Oliver and Anna, his gaze no longer fixed on the distant horizon, but on the family he had waited so long to find again. Chapter 7. The adjustment. The motel room was modest but clean, with 2 queen beds and enough floor space for the dog bed Samuel had thoughtfully provided. Max entered cautiously, his nails clicking on the laminate flooring as he conducted a thorough inspection of the unfamiliar territory. His nose worked overtime, cataloging the strange scents of industrial cleaners and previous occupants. The Smiths watched his exploration with a mixture of delight and concern. In the years of separation, they had idealized their memories of Max, remembering the playful puppy and loyal companion, while forgetting the ordinary challenges of canine ownership. Now they were faced with the reality of a dog who had essentially gone feral, who had developed independent habits and potentially forgotten the routines of domestic life. "Should we?" Anna hesitated, gesturing vaguely. "I don't know. Try to give him a bath?" Oliver shook his head firmly. "Not yet. Samuel said we should let him set the pace. Too many changes at once might overwhelm him." Anna nodded, acknowledging her son's wisdom. Since the reunion at the gas station, Oliver had exhibited a maturity beyond his 14 years, instinctively understanding Max's needs in a way that eluded the adults. Perhaps it was because his own experience of trauma gave him insight into the dog's cautious navigation of this altered reality. Michael sat heavily on one of the beds, his energy depleted by the emotional day. His gaze followed Max's movements with quiet wonder. "Smart dog," he murmured. "Remembered us." He did. Anna agreed, sitting beside her husband and taking his hand. "And we'll help him remember everything else too. How to be part of a family again." That first night was a delicate dance of re-establishing boundaries and connections. Max refused to lie on the dog bed, instead positioning himself near the door, perhaps maintaining his habit of watchfulness, or possibly ensuring he had an escape route. He accepted food from their hands but ate with the quick efficiency of an animal accustomed to protecting his meals. When Oliver attempted to brush his matted coat, Max tolerated the attention briefly before moving away. "He's confused," Oliver observed as they prepared for bed. "He knows who we are, but he doesn't remember how things work." Anna nodded, feeling a pang of empathy. Wasn't that precisely how they had all felt in the aftermath of the accident? Recognizing their lives but no longer understanding how to inhabit them comfortably. "Give him time," she said, as much to herself as to Oliver. "It's a lot to process." As they settled into bed, Oliver in one, Anna and Michael in the other, Max remained at his post by the door, sitting upright and alert despite obvious fatigue. Hours later, when Anna woke in the darkness, she found the dog had finally succumbed to exhaustion, lying curled in a tight ball on the hard floor, his body positioned between the door and the beds, as if standing guard even in sleep. The following morning brought new challenges. Max resisted leaving the motel room, seeming to fear another separation. It took 20 minutes of gentle coaxing to convince him to venture outside for a necessary bathroom break, and even then, he remained tethered to Oliver's side, his eyes constantly checking that all family members were present. Over breakfast in the motel's simple dining area, where the manager had made an exception to allow Max's presence, the family discussed their next steps. "We should take him to a vet before heading home," Anna suggested, keeping her voice low. "He must be at least 8 or 9 years old now, and after living outdoors for so long." Oliver nodded seriously. "Samuel said he'd find us a local vet who could fit us in today, and he wants to meet us again to get some final details for his article." "Article?" Michael asked, his brow furrowing. "About Max," Oliver explained patiently. "About how he waited for us, and how we found each other again." Anna watched as understanding dawned on her husband's face. The accident had left Michael with difficulties processing new information, particularly when it was presented verbally. She had learned to give him time, to resist the urge to finish his thoughts, or speak for him. "Good story," Michael finally said, with a decisive nod. "Hope story." "Yes," Anna agreed, her throat tight with emotion. "It is a hopeful story." The veterinary examination later that morning revealed what they had feared. Max was significantly underweight, had several decaying teeth that needed extraction, suffered from arthritis, likely exacerbated by exposure to the elements, and showed signs of heartworm, all conditions requiring treatment. Yet the vet, a compassionate woman in her 50s, seemed impressed by his overall resilience. "He's in remarkable shape considering what he's been through," she concluded, gently stroking Max's head as she administered necessary vaccines. "With proper care, medication and a good diet, he should have several comfortable years ahead of him." The financial implications were considerable. The immediate treatments, medications and follow-up care would cost well over $1,000, with more expenses to come. For the Smith family, still recovering from the financial devastation of Michael's medical bills, this represented a significant burden. Yet there was never any question of whether they would proceed. "We'll figure it out," Anna said firmly when the vet stepped out to prepare prescriptions. "He waited 4 years for us. We can handle some vet bills." That afternoon, they met Samuel at a quiet park where Max could remain outdoors, still uncomfortable in enclosed spaces with strangers. The journalist had brought not only his notebook but also several small gifts for Max, high-quality treats, a proper collar and leash to replace the makeshift rope, and a sturdy travel crate for the journey to Seattle. I've received permission from my editor to set up a donation fund as part of the article," Samuel explained as they walked slowly along a shaded path, Max trotting between Oliver and Anna. "If you're comfortable with it, of course." Max's story has already generated significant interest online. "I suspect many readers would be happy to contribute to his medical care." Anna's first instinct was to refuse. Pride had been one of the few possessions they had retained after losing nearly everything else. But looking at Max, at the long road of rehabilitation ahead, she recognized that this was no time for false dignity. She swallowed hard. That would be tremendously helpful. "Thank you." Samuel's article, complete with before and after photographs of Max's reunion with the Smith family, was published 3 days later. By then they had returned to Seattle, the journey home proving less difficult than anticipated. Max had traveled in his crate in the back of the rental car, occasionally whining but mostly sleeping, exhausted by the emotional and physical demands of the past few days. Their small apartment, once carefully organized to accommodate Michael's mobility needs, now required further adaptation for their four-legged family member. Rugs were laid down over slippery floors, fragile items moved to higher shelves, and a corner of the living room designated as Max's area, complete with the dog bed he still refused to use. The first week was, in Anna's private moments of honesty, incredibly difficult. Max paced constantly, especially at night. He startled at unfamiliar noises, the dishwasher, the garbage disposal, the neighbor's television. He followed family members from room to room, panicking if doors closed between them. Twice he urinated indoors, seemingly forgetting housebreaking rules he had once known perfectly. Oliver, despite being in the midst of midterm exams, devoted every spare moment to retraining and reassuring Max. He researched behavioral techniques for traumatized dogs, created a consistent schedule of walks and feeding times, and slept on the floor beside Max when the dog's anxiety seemed particularly acute. Surprisingly, it was Michael who often connected most successfully with Max during this adjustment period. Perhaps it was because his own post-accident behaviors, his sensitivity to overstimulation, his need for routine, his occasional emotional outbursts, mirrored the dog's symptoms of trauma. Whatever the reason, Max seemed to find comfort in Michael's presence, often choosing to lie at his feet during the day. "He understands," Michael explained to Anna one evening, his speech slow but clear, as he watched Max settle beside his chair. "We both changed, both different now." Anna felt tears spring to her eyes at this simple but profound observation. Her husband, whose verbal expressions were often limited since the accident, had articulated something essential about Max's situation, and perhaps about all of their circumstances. They had each been irrevocably altered by trauma, forced to adapt to new realities and limitations. In recognizing this shared experience, perhaps they could also share the path to healing. Chapter 8. The Healing. 3 weeks after bringing Max home, Samuel's article was published online, with the headline, "The Faithful Sentinel, the dog who waited 4 years for his family's return." Within hours, the story went viral, touching hearts across the country and beyond. Accompanying the article was a link to a donation page for Max's medical expenses, which reached its goal within the first day and continued to grow. The public response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in, along with offers of free pet supplies, services from animal behaviorists, and even inquiries about book and film rights. Anna, fiercely protective of her family's privacy, worked with Samuel to manage the sudden attention, accepting what was helpful while deflecting intrusive interest. For Max, the physical healing progressed steadily. His dental surgery was successful, removing the decayed teeth that had caused him pain. The prescribed diet began to fill out his thin frame, adding muscle where there had been only bone and sinew. His coat, with regular brushing and improved nutrition, regained some of its former luster. The heartworm treatment was more challenging, requiring careful monitoring and limited activity, but even this he endured with stoic patience. The emotional healing proved more complex. Max's traumatic experiences had altered his behavior in ways that were not easily reversed. He remained hypervigilant, reacting intensely to perceived threats. He developed ritualistic behaviors, checking the apartment's perimeter multiple times before settling, insisting on specific routes during walks, becoming distressed if routines were disrupted. Oliver, now fiercely committed to understanding canine psychology, explained these behaviors to his parents with newfound expertise. "It's like he developed OCD while he was waiting for us," he said one evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Max. "These patterns made him feel safe when everything else was uncertain. We can't just make him stop, we have to help him feel secure enough that he doesn't need them anymore." The boy's insight proved invaluable. Rather than attempting to break Max's rituals abruptly, they began incorporating them into the family's routines, gradually modifying them to be less restrictive. Max was permitted his perimeter checks but encouraged to settle more quickly afterward. His preferred walking routes were respected but slowly expanded to include new paths. Most significantly, they addressed his separation anxiety, his greatest fear being, understandably, that they would disappear again. This began with very short separations. Anna or Oliver would leave the apartment for just 30 seconds, then return with calm reassurance. Gradually, these absences were extended, always following the same predictable pattern so Max could develop confidence in their return. "It's all about rebuilding trust," explained Dr. Martinez, a veterinary behaviorist who had reached out after reading the article. "He needs to relearn that separations are temporary, that his people always come back." 6 weeks after Max's homecoming, they experienced their first major breakthrough. Oliver had been sitting on the living room floor, working on a school project, when he realized Max was no longer by his side. Concerned, he looked up to find the German Shepherd voluntarily lying on his dog bed for the first time. Still watchful, but choosing comfort over vigilance. The significance of this small act of trust brought tears to Oliver's eyes. That night, Anna updated the online journal she had begun keeping for Max's supporters. Today, Max chose his bed over the hard floor. It might seem like a small thing, but for a dog who has spent 4 years denying himself comfort while he waited, it represents an enormous step. He's beginning to believe that he doesn't need to stand guard anymore, that it's safe to rest, to be cared for, rather than always being the caretaker. We are learning from him every day about loyalty, resilience, and the capacity to heal after profound loss. The comment section quickly filled with messages of encouragement and similar stories of animal resilience. The community that had formed around Max's journey became an unexpected source of support, not just for the dog, but for the entire Smith family. Chapter 9. The Turning Point. The spring rain pattered against the apartment windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, the Smith family was engaged in their evening routines, Anna preparing dinner, Michael sorting his medication for the next day, and Oliver completing homework at the kitchen table. Max lay in his now favored spot on the rug, seemingly relaxed despite the approaching storm. When the first lightning struck, illuminating the room in harsh white light, Max's body tensed. By the second thunderclap, louder, closer, he was on his feet, trembling visibly. Before anyone could react, he bolted toward the front door, scratching frantically at the wood. "Max," Oliver called, rising quickly from his chair. "It's okay, boy, it's just thunder." But Max was beyond reassurance, his body rigid with panic. When Oliver attempted to touch him, he shied away, his behavior reminiscent of their early days together, as if he had forgotten the trust so painstakingly rebuilt over the past 3 months. Anna watched with growing concern. Max's reaction seemed disproportionate to the stimulus, suggesting it had triggered something deeper than simple fear of thunder. "The accident," she said suddenly, the realization striking her. "It was storming the night of our crash. Remember, the roads were slick." Oliver's expression shifted in understanding. He associates storms with losing us. For the next hour, they tried everything to calm Max's distress. Comfort, distraction, the anti-anxiety medication prescribed by the vet. Nothing seemed to penetrate his terror. As the storm intensified, so did his frantic attempts to escape, until he was panting heavily, his heart racing dangerously fast. "We need to get him to the emergency vet," Anna decided, grabbing her car keys. "He could have a heart attack if this continues." The challenge became getting Max into the car. He resisted their attempts to approach him, now wedged under the kitchen table, his eyes wide with panic. It was Michael who finally managed it, lowering his large frame to the floor, with difficulty, and simply lying beside the terrified dog, without attempting to touch him. "Safe," he said quietly, the word clear despite his speech difficulties. "You're safe, Max. Family." For several minutes they remained there, the man and dog equally damaged by fate, equally determined to survive. Gradually, Max's breathing slowed, his trembling eased. When Michael cautiously extended his hand, the dog permitted the contact, leaning slightly into the touch. "Car ride," Michael said, maintaining the calm, simple communication that seemed most effective. "Help you feel better." With agonizing slowness, they coaxed Max toward the door. The storm continued unabated, each lightning flash causing him to flinch, but he no longer fought against their guidance. Oliver attached the leash, while Anna held an umbrella ready. Together they escorted Max to the car, Michael moving slowly alongside, despite the rain soaking his clothes. The drive to the emergency veterinary clinic was tense, but manageable. Max huddled on the back seat with Oliver's protective arm around him. The medication finally began taking effect, dulling the edges of his panic. After examination, the veterinarian confirmed that Max had experienced a severe anxiety attack, but had avoided any cardiac damage. She prescribed a stronger sedative for future storms, and recommended consulting with a behavioral specialist about desensitization therapy. It was nearly midnight when they returned home, all exhausted by the ordeal. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a gentle patter of rain that seemed almost apologetic for the earlier violence. Max, still slightly sedated, followed them inside with uncharacteristic docility. What happened next would later be identified as the turning point in Max's rehabilitation. Without prompting, he walked directly to Oliver's bedroom and lay down on the boy's bed, something he had never done since his return. Oliver, uncertain how to respond to this break in their careful routines, looked questioningly at his mother. "Let him stay," Anna advised softly. "I think he needs to be close tonight." Oliver nodded and carefully settled on the bed beside Max, keeping a respectful distance. To his surprise, the dog immediately shifted closer, pressing his body against the boy's side and resting his head on Oliver's chest. Within minutes, Max was deeply asleep, his breathing slow and regular. When Anna checked on them an hour later, she found both boy and dog in the same position, Oliver's arm draped protectively over Max's body, both faces peaceful in sleep. The sight brought tears to her eyes, not of worry or sadness for once, but of profound relief. In this moment of vulnerability, Max had made a choice to seek comfort rather than escape, to trust rather than fear. The next morning, something had fundamentally shifted. Max greeted them with a wagging tail, not the hesitant, partial wag they had grown accustomed to, but the full-bodied joyous motion they remembered from before the accident. He accepted breakfast eagerly, performed his perimeter check only once, and then, most remarkably, brought Oliver a forgotten tennis ball, dropping it at the boy's feet with an expectant look. Oliver stared at the ball in disbelief, before turning to his mother with tears in his eyes. "He wants to play," he whispered. "Mom, he remembers how to play." That simple act, the offering of a ball, the invitation to shared joy, marked the true beginning of Max's return, not just physically to his family, but emotionally to the life he had once known, and the dog he had once been. Chapter 10. The transformation. Summer arrived, bringing warmth that seemed to penetrate more than just the physical world. 6 months after their reunion, the changes in both Max and the Smith family were profound. Max had gained nearly 15 pounds of healthy weight, his once dull coat now gleaming with vitality. The veterinarian had pronounced him in excellent health for a dog of approximately 9 years. The heartworm successfully treated, and his arthritis well managed with medication. While he still exhibited some anxious behaviors, startling at certain sounds, occasionally pacing during storms, these incidents had decreased in both frequency and intensity. More striking than his physical recovery was his emotional transformation. The wary, trauma-affected dog, who had first entered their apartment, now greeted each day with unmistakable enthusiasm. He had rediscovered play, romping with Oliver in the dog park with the exuberance of a much younger animal. He had developed new friendships, with the elderly Labrador, who lived downstairs, with the mail carrier who always brought treats, with the neighbors who stopped to admire the famous waiting dog they had read about online. For the Smith family, Max's journey had catalyzed healing of their own. Oliver, once withdrawn and troubled by nightmares, had blossomed into an engaged teenager with a passion for animal behavior. His experiences with Max had inspired a potential career path in veterinary medicine, giving him a sense of purpose that had been lacking since the accident. Michael, whose recovery had plateaued in many areas, found renewed motivation through his bond with Max. The responsibility of afternoon walks had improved his physical stamina, while the simple, direct communication required with the dog had strangely enhanced his verbal skills. His speech therapist noted significant improvements, attributing them to the regular conversations Michael held with Max during their time alone together. Anna, who had carried the heaviest burden as caretaker for both husband and son, discovered unexpected relief in sharing this role with Max. The dog's intuitive response to emotional needs, lying quietly beside Michael during challenging days, seeking out Oliver when anxiety struck, pressing against Anna's legs when exhaustion overwhelmed her, provided a form of support that required no explanation or gratitude. One warm June evening, as the family sat on their small balcony watching the sunset, Anna realized with sudden clarity how much their collective energy had shifted. Before Max's return, they had been survivors, functioning but not truly living, managing but rarely thriving. The trauma of the accident had left them in a perpetual state of aftermath, defined more by what they had lost than by what remained. Now, observing Michael laughing at Max's antics as Oliver taught the dog a new trick, Anna recognized that they had moved beyond mere survival. They were building something new, not a replica of their previous life, which was irretrievably lost, but something equally valuable in its own right. That night, she updated the online journal, which had evolved from a medical record of Max's recovery into a broader chronicle of their shared journey. Today marks 6 months since Max came home with us. When I think about the dog who stood watch at that gas station for 4 years, never giving up hope despite all evidence suggesting he should, I'm humbled by what true loyalty looks like. But I'm equally moved by his capacity to relearn joy, to accept that the waiting is over, that it's okay to play and rest, and simply be a dog again. There's a lesson there for all of us, I think. Trauma changes us, there's no denying that. The accident that separated us from Max altered all of our lives in irrevocable ways. For years, like Max, we were caught in a kind of suspended animation, physically moving forward, but emotionally fixed in place, waiting for a restoration that couldn't come. What Max has taught us is that healing doesn't mean returning to who we were before. It means integrating our experiences, even the painful ones, into a new way of being. It means accepting change without surrendering hope. It means finding joy not despite our scars, but sometimes because of what they've taught us about resilience and love. Michael said something profound today, in one of those moments of perfect clarity that occasionally break through his speech difficulties. Watching Max racing through the dog park, he smiled and said, "Not the same dog, better dog." When I asked what he meant, he explained, "Deeper, knows what matters now." I think the same could be said for all of us. Chapter 11. The Choice. The anniversary of the accident approached with the inevitable weight of significant dates. For years, the Smith family had marked this day quietly, acknowledging its importance without celebration or excessive dwelling. This year, however, felt different. With Max's return, the narrative of that fateful September day had been fundamentally altered, no longer just a story of loss, but now also one of extraordinary reunion. As the date drew near, Anna noticed Max becoming increasingly restless. He paced more frequently, his gaze often fixed on the door or windows, as if expecting something. His behavior reminded her uncomfortably of his early days with them, when anxiety had governed his every move. "Do you think he knows?" she asked Oliver as they watched Max circling the living room. "Do you think he somehow remembers what day is coming?" Oliver, now 15, and increasingly thoughtful, considered this. Not the date, obviously, but animals have ways of sensing patterns we don't always understand. The change in light, in temperature, maybe even in our behavior, we're probably acting differently, without realizing it. His insight proved accurate. As September 12th approached, they all found themselves affected by subtle tensions. Michael's sleep became disturbed, his nightmares returning after months of relative peace. Oliver grew quieter, his focus turning inward. Anna found herself checking the weather forecast obsessively, relieved to find no storms predicted for the anniversary. The evening before, as Anna prepared dinner, she made a spontaneous decision. "I think we should go back," she announced to her surprised family. "To the gas station, to where it all happened." The suggestion hung in the air, radical in its departure from their careful avoidance of painful memories. Michael looked uncertain, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. Oliver glanced at Max, who had raised his head at the shift in Anna's tone. "Not to dwell on the accident," she clarified, sensing their hesitation, "but to acknowledge how far we've come to let Max see that place again, now that he knows the waiting is over." The conversation that followed was thoughtful and measured, weighing potential benefits against psychological risks. By bedtime, a consensus had been reached. They would make the journey, but with an escape plan in place should it prove too difficult for any of them. The following morning dawned clear and mild, a perfect early autumn day, ironically similar to the conditions 4 years earlier before the storm had swept in. They packed the car with care, ensuring Max's comfort with his favorite blanket and toys. The drive would take approximately 3 hours each way, a significant undertaking but manageable as a day trip. Michael, who rarely ventured far from home due to fatigue and anxiety, insisted on coming despite Anna's offer to remain behind with him. "Family trip," he said firmly. "All of us." As they drove south toward Portland, a remarkable calm settled over the car. Max, who typically grew anxious during long drives, lay peacefully in the back seat beside Oliver, occasionally lifting his head to observe the changing landscape, but showing no signs of distress. They reached the highway where the accident had occurred shortly after noon. Anna, driving as she had that night 4 years ago, felt her hands tighten on the steering wheel as they approached the curve where their lives had changed forever. Michael placed his hand over hers briefly, a gesture of solidarity, of shared memory. "There," Oliver said quietly from the back seat, pointing to the guardrail that had been repaired after their car had broken through it. Beyond lay the ravine where they had landed, where Michael had sustained his life-altering injuries, where Max had fled in terror. Anna slowed the car, but didn't stop. By mutual agreement, they would visit the gas station first, approaching the more difficult memories, only after they had reconnected with the site of hope and reunion. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the familiar lot. The gas station appeared largely unchanged, the same weathered sign, the same modest structure. Betty's diner across the road had received a fresh coat of paint, but otherwise remained as they remembered it. As Anna parked the car, she noticed Max's posture change dramatically. He stood up in the back seat, body rigid with attention, his gaze fixed on the spot where he had maintained his vigil for 4 long years. When Oliver opened the door, Max exited with uncharacteristic urgency, standing motionless on the asphalt as he surveyed his former post. For a breathless moment, Anna feared they had made a terrible mistake, that being here might trigger a regression, might somehow convince Max that he needed to resume his waiting. But after his initial frozen recognition, the dog turned back to look at them, his expression almost questioning. "It's okay, boy," Oliver said gently. "We're all here together, no one staying behind this time." Whether Max understood the words or merely the reassuring tone, his posture relaxed. He approached his former waiting spot slowly, sniffing the ground as if confirming old memories. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to Anna's eyes, he deliberately turned his back on the spot and walked back to the family, sitting down firmly at Oliver's feet. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. In that simple action, Max had made a clear choice, acknowledging the past, but choosing the present, choosing them. The moment was interrupted by a familiar voice calling Anna's name. Betty Clarkson emerged from her diner, wiping her hands on her apron as she hurried across the road. Though they had kept in touch via occasional emails and updates on Max's progress, they hadn't seen each other in person since leaving with Max 6 months earlier. "I thought that might be you," Betty said warmly, embracing Anna before turning her attention to Max. "Well, look at you. What a transformation." She knelt despite her age, offering her hand to the dog who sniffed it politely, before allowing her to stroke his head. He remembers you, Oliver observed, smiling at the interaction. Of course he does, Betty replied, matter-of-factly. We had our little routine for 4 years, didn't we, Max? The reunion with Betty extended into an impromptu lunch at her diner, where she insisted on treating them, and brought a special plate of grilled chicken for Max. The conversation flowed easily, catching up on 6 months of changes and updates. Betty shared how the gas station had become something of a local landmark after Max's story went viral, with occasional visitors stopping specifically to see the spot where the waiting dog had stood his faithful vigil. Your journalist friend did right by Max's story, she told them. Wrote it with respect, not just for headlines. Made people think about what loyalty really means. After lunch, with Betty's blessing, they revisited Max's waiting spot more deliberately. This time, they took photographs, not of the sad solitary sentinel he had been, but of the healthy, integrated family they had become. Max participated with surprising patience, sitting proudly among them, as if understanding the significance of the moment. The visit to the accident site itself was briefer and more solemn. They parked at a safe distance from the road, walking the last 100 yards to the guardrail that had failed to contain their car. Looking down into the ravine, now overgrown with vegetation, Anna was struck by how ordinary it appeared, just another slope beside just another highway curve. The site of their worst trauma held no particular energy or darkness, it simply was. Michael stood silently beside her, his breathing steady despite the difficult memories. Oliver kept one hand on Max's collar, though the dog showed no sign of distress or recognition. Perhaps for him, this place held less significance than the gas station, just the starting point of his journey, rather than its defining location. As they turned to leave, Michael spoke unexpectedly, his words careful and measured. Not defined by this place, he said, gesturing toward the ravine, just passed through it. Anna looked at her husband with surprise and deep affection, recognizing the profound truth in his simple statement. They had indeed passed through this place, both literally on that rainy night and figuratively in the years of struggle that followed. But they had continued moving, however slowly, toward something else, toward healing, toward reconnection, toward the family that now stood complete with Max among them. Before leaving the area, they made one final stop at the local animal shelter, where they delivered a substantial donation from the funds raised through Max's story. The staff, familiar with the viral article, greeted them with enthusiasm and gave them a tour of the facility, where several dogs and cats awaited their own second chances. In the kennels, Max walked calmly beside them, occasionally showing interest in the other dogs, but remaining composed. His behavior reflected none of the anxiety or fear that might have been expected in this environment of barking dogs and confined spaces. Instead, he moved with the quiet confidence of an animal secure in his place in the world. As they prepared to leave, the shelter director pulled Anna aside. "I hope you know what your story has done," she said earnestly. "Since that article went viral, our adoption rates have increased by 30%. People come in asking specifically for adult dogs, for the ones who've been waiting the longest. They say if Max could remain so loyal after everything he went through, these dogs deserve a chance too." This unexpected ripple effect, lives changed beyond their immediate circle, added yet another dimension to Max's legacy. His solitary vigil, once simply a manifestation of one dog's extraordinary loyalty, had become a catalyst for wider compassion. The drive home was peaceful, all 4 passengers content in a way that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Max slept soundly in the back seat, his body relaxed, his breathing deep and even. As darkness fell, and the miles passed beneath their wheels, Anna realized they had achieved something remarkable. They had revisited the source of their trauma, not as victims, but as survivors, not with dread, but with perspective. The accident would always be part of their story. The scars, Michael's physical limitations, Oliver's emotional sensitivity, Anna's burden of responsibility, Max's occasional anxiety, would never completely fade. But these marks had been incorporated into a new wholeness, a hard-won integration of past and present. As they crossed the Seattle city limits, Michael reached over to take Anna's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. From the back seat came the sound of Oliver's soft laughter as Max dreamed, his paws twitching in sleep. "Do you think he's chasing something?" Oliver asked. Anna smiled, keeping her eyes on the road ahead. "I think," she said thoughtfully, "he's finally running towards something instead of waiting for it to return." Chapter 12. The legacy. 1 year to the day since Max's reunion with the Smith family, a small gathering assembled in the community room of their apartment building. The occasion was ostensibly a birthday celebration. They had designated this date as Max's official birthday, lacking knowledge of his actual one, but it represented something more significant, a milestone in their collective journey. The room was modestly decorated with balloons and a banner reading "Happy Birthday, Max." A table held a cake for the human guests and dog-friendly treats for Max and the few canine attendees. Photographs were displayed on a bulletin board, a visual timeline of Max's transformation from the solitary sentinel to the confident, healthy dog who now moved easily among the small crowd, accepting affection with dignified grace. The guest list included those who had become part of their extended circle: Betty Clarkson, who had flown up from Oregon for the occasion; Samuel Thompson, whose article had connected Max's story to the wider world; Dr. Martinez, the veterinary behaviorist who had guided his psychological recovery; neighbors who had witnessed his daily progress; and even a few followers of the online journal who had become virtual friends through their shared investment in Max's journey. As Anna observed the gathering, she was struck by how many lives had been touched by one dog's extraordinary devotion. What had begun as a personal story of loss and reunion had expanded into something approaching a community, bound together by admiration for Max's unwavering loyalty and inspired by his capacity for healing. Oliver, now approaching 16, had grown not just physically but emotionally during this year. With Max, his earlier withdrawal had given way to a quiet confidence, his traumatic memories gradually integrated into a more complex understanding of resilience. The dog had become his partner in this growth, sometimes his protector, sometimes his responsibility, always his friend. Most remarkable was Michael's evolution. While his brain injury remained a permanent reality, affecting his speech and certain cognitive functions, he had discovered new pathways of connection through his bond with Max. The simple direct communication required with the dog had somehow transferred to his human interactions, giving him confidence to engage more fully despite his limitations. Today, he moved through the small gathering with a comfort that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Samuel approached Anna as she was refreshing the punch bowl, his journalist's notebook conspicuously absent for once. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, "whether you've given any more thought to the book proposal." Following the viral success of his article, several publishers had expressed interest in an expanded version of Max's story. Anna had been hesitant, protective of her family's privacy, even as she recognized the potential value in sharing their experience more widely. "Actually, we have," she replied. "Oliver's been keeping notes about Max's progress, almost like a behavior journal, and I have all the updates from the online page. We're thinking, maybe a collaboration. Your journalism expertise, our personal perspective." Samuel's face lit up. "That would be perfect. A multi-voiced narrative. And the timing is good. There's been renewed interest since the follow-up piece ran last month." That article, focusing on the broader impact of Max's story, had documented the Max effect at shelters across the country, increased adoptions of older dogs, greater awareness of post-traumatic stress in animals, and expanded programs for reuniting lost pets with owners through persistent outreach. Their conversation was interrupted by Betty, who approached with a plate of food and a determined expression. "You two can talk business later," she scolded good-naturedly. "Anna hasn't touched a bite all afternoon." As the women chatted, Samuel moved away to join Oliver and Michael, who were demonstrating Max's newest trick, bringing specific items when asked by name, a complex behavior that showcased both his intelligence and the trust he now placed in human direction. The party reached its emotional peak when Oliver dimmed the lights and Anna carried out a dog-friendly cake topped with a single candle. As everyone sang "Happy Birthday," Max sat at attention, his eyes reflecting the small flame, his posture conveying that peculiar dignity that had sustained him through his long vigil and subsequent journey. "Make a wish for him," someone called out, and Oliver, after a moment's thought, bent to whisper something in Max's ear before carefully blowing out the candle. Applause filled the room, followed by the distribution of cake and treats. Later, as the gathering began to disperse, Dr. Martinez pulled Anna aside. "I wanted you to know," she said, "that I've been using Max's case in my lectures to veterinary students. With your permission, of course." "What aspects?" Anna asked, curious about how their personal experience translated to professional education. "The resilience, primarily. The way trauma can create deeply ingrained behaviors that seem irrational but actually served a survival purpose. And how healing requires not erasing those behaviors but understanding them, working with them rather than against them." The veterinarian smiled warmly. "Max is teaching the next generation of animal doctors about patience and respect." As twilight descended, the family walked home together through the mild September evening. Max trotted beside them on his leash, occasionally glancing up as if confirming their presence. The birthday bandana around his neck gave him a festive air that contrasted charmingly with his natural dignity. At home, tired but contented, they settled into their evening routine. Michael took his medication while Anna cleared away the gifts and leftover party supplies. Oliver sat on the floor beside Max, quietly reviewing photographs from the celebration on his phone. "Do you know what I wished for him?" he asked suddenly, looking up at his parents. "When I blew out the candle," Anna paused in her tidying, "I thought wishes were supposed to be secret." "This one's okay to share," Oliver said with a soft smile. "I wished that he would understand how many lives he's changed. Not just ours, but all the people who've heard his story, all the other dogs who've been adopted because of him." Michael lowered himself carefully to the floor beside his son and the dog. "He knows," he said with the simple certainty that often characterized his post-injury insights. "Different way, but he knows." As if in confirmation, Max rose from his comfortable position and made a slow circuit of the room, pausing briefly before each family member. He pressed his muzzle against Michael's hand, accepted a scratch behind the ears from Anna, and finally settled beside Oliver, resting his head on the boy's lap with a deep sigh of contentment. In that quiet moment, the four of them connected by invisible threads of shared experience. Anna recognized the profound truth in Michael's assessment. Max might not comprehend his story in human terms, the viral article, the donations, the adoptions inspired by his example, but he understood the essential reality that waiting had given way to belonging, that loyalty had been reciprocated with love, that his long vigil had ended not in disappointment but in the joyful reunion he had never stopped believing would come. Outside, the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, witnesses to countless stories of separation and reconnection, of loss and discovery, of unwavering faith rewarded. Within the walls of the modest apartment, a family that had been broken and reformed, tested and strengthened, continued their quiet evening routine, ordinary in its mechanics, but extraordinary in its meaning. Max, once the faithful sentinel, now the beloved companion, closed his eyes and dreamed not of endless waiting, but of tomorrow's walk, of familiar voices calling his name, of the life that had become worth more than the memory he had guarded for so long. In the end, his legacy was not just the remarkable story of his 4-year vigil, though that would be told and retold for years to come. His true legacy lived in the hearts he had helped to heal, in the hope he had restored, and in the simple, profound reminder that love, persistent, patient love, can endure circumstances that seem impossible to survive, and sometimes, if we are very fortunate, it can lead us home. The end.